June 27, 2016, Monday of the 13th week in Ordinary Time.
A reading from the book of the prophet Amos. Thus says the Lord, For 3 crimes of Israel, and for 4, I will not revoke my word, because they sell the just man for silver and the poor man for a pair of sandals. They trample the heads of the weak into the dust of the earth and force the lowly out of the way. Son and father go to the same prostitute, profaning my holy name. Upon garments taken in pledge they recline beside my altar. And the wine of those who have been fined they drink in the house of their God. Yet it was I who destroyed the Amorites before them, who were as tall as the cedars and as strong as the oak trees. I destroyed their fruit above and their roots beneath. It was I who brought you up from the land of Egypt, and who led you through the desert for 40 years to occupy the land of the Amorites. Beware, I will crush you into the ground as a wagon crushes when laden with sheaves. Flight shall perish from the swift, and the strong man shall not retain his strength. The warrior shall not save his life, nor the bowman stand his ground. The swift of foot shall not escape, nor the horseman save his life. And the most stout-hearted of warriors shall flee naked on that day, says the Lord. The word of the Lord.
The responsorial psalm. The response is, Remember this, you who never think of God. Why do you recite my statutes and profess my covenant with your mouth, though you hate discipline and cast my words behind you? Remember this, you who never think of God. When you see a thief, you keep pace with him, and with adulterers you throw in your lot. To your mouth you give free rein for evil. You harness your tongue to deceit. Remember this, you who never think of God. You sit speaking against your brother. Against your mother's son you spread rumors. When you do these things, shall I be deaf to it? Or do you think that I am like yourself? I will correct you by drawing them up before your eyes. Remember this, you who never think of God. Consider this, you who forget God, lest I rend you and there be no one to rescue you. He that offers praise as a sacrifice glorifies me, and to him that goes the right way I will show the salvation of God. Remember this, you who never think of God.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other shore. A scribe approached and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. Jesus answered him, Foxes have dens, and birds of the sky have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to rest his head. Another of his disciples said to him, Lord, let me go first and bury my father. But Jesus answered him, Follow me, and let the dead bury their dead. The Gospel of the Lord.
June 27th, Monday of the 13th week in Ordinary Time. The first reading comes from the book of Amos, chapter 2, verses 6 to 10 and 13 to 16. Amos was a prophet from the south, but he went up to one of the shrines in the north, and he began to proclaim a series of condemnations against the enemies of Israel. And there were 7 condemnations, so the Israelites were thrilled because 7 is the perfect number. They thought that Amos had finished his condemnations. But then Amos turned to the Israelites themselves and he gave an 8th condemnation. And their condemnation was double that which was received by the others. Because they had received the law, they had received the promise. They were brought into the promised land, and the people who lived there were dispossessed. And nevertheless they had sinned against the Lord and against his people. They had sold a just man for silver, that people were so poor that after they had given up their land, after they had given up their oxen, they had to sell themselves into slavery just to survive. Sons and fathers had gone to the same prostitute. Most probably the prophet is referring to sacred prostitutes in pagan temples. Upon garments taken in pledge, they reclined beside the altar. Garments taken in pledge, when a loan was given to somebody, then the person had to give some sort of surety that the loan would be repaid. Very often the people would ask for their garments, their cloak, and that was the only thing the poor people had to keep them warm at night. Instead of giving it back to them to keep them warm, the rich people would use it simply as a cushion. And when they were fined, they were told that they had to give a certain number of liters of wine to the temple. That became the opportunity for a party. They took the wine that they were fined and they drank it right in front of the temple, getting drunk. And therefore, God would severely punish Israel because they had been so blessed, more was expected of them. The Gospel is from Matthew 8:18-12. A man comes up to Jesus and said, "I'll follow you wherever you go." Jesus responds, "Foxes have their dens, birds of the air have their nests. The Son of Man has no place to lay his head." That following Jesus is not a question of arriving, it's a question of a journey. That in our spiritual life we continually have to grow. And then also in terms of where God calls us. Where God called us today is not necessarily where God is going to call us tomorrow. So we have to be ready to change, to follow wherever God calls us, and not to get stuck in our ways so much that we get too comfortable. Another disciple said to Jesus, "I'll follow you, but let me bury my father first." He's not talking about the burial that would occur immediately after a person's death. That occurs by sunset of the same day when the person died. Rather, he's talking about the fact that once the person is buried in the outer room of the tomb, their body was left there for 11 to 12 months so that it would decompose. And once it had decomposed, the eldest son would enter and pick up the bones, put it in an urn or a sarcophagus, which would then be carried into the inner room of the tomb where they were kept. This man was asking for a year's time before he would follow Jesus. And the message, let the dead bury the dead. When God calls, you've got to respond no matter what you're doing. You have to be ready to be surprised and respond with generosity. And may God bless us.